Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar brought to you by InspireOne. We'd like to thank you all for attending this session and hope you find it relevant. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some quick logistical items. Since this is a listen-only webinar, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A area and we'll do our best to address all the questions either during the course of the webinar or towards the end. In case you drop out or must leave for any reason, you can view a recorded version of the webinar, which would be shared with you as a follow-up email. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, please write to us at info@InspireOne, and we'll be happy to email it to you or send you a link from where you can download the deck. So to begin with, the topic for today's discussion is quantifying workforce readiness using gamification. For those of you who are new to this concept, workforce readiness entails having the right set of skills, competencies, knowledge, and agility among new and our existing employees to be relevant and proficient at the workplace for today's new age roles. To help us better understand this concept and to understand how do we use gamification to assess the same, we have with us Mr. Rajendra Ghag, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Blue Dart Express Limited. Rajendra has over 36 years of work experience in various spheres of human resource field. Prior to joining Blue Dart, he was associated with HDFC Life Insurance Company, where he served as the Chief Human Resources Officer, the Chief Value Officer, and also the Senior Vice President, Administration, Business Services, Excellence, and Corporate Social Responsibility. He was also with DHL Express as CHRO and their first choice Senior Advisor, South Asia. Rajesh has also worked with other global and international Indian multinational companies like Cadbury, Reliance Industries, National Organic Chemical Industries, and SIAT. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Joining him is Namita Patwari, who is the General Manager HR at Blue Dart. Namita is a strategic human resources management professional and an HR business partner with 17 years of HR leadership experience in various realms of people management. Her areas of expertise include mergers and acquisitions, change management, OD intervention, talent acquisition, and delivering best people strategies across BFSI, logistics, and engineering and construction companies. Prior to joining Blue Dart, Namita has worked with Ventura Securities, DSV, Global Transport and Logistics. We welcome you, Namita.
Thank you.
We also have with us Kartik Mohla, who is the founder and CEO of InspireOne Technologies, where we help our enterprise customers accelerate their sales enablement and field force development. Kartik has 14 years of experience across investment banking, learning and development, and B2B SaaS. Prior to InspireOne Technologies, Kartik served as the business head at InspireOne, spearheading several new initiatives ranging from developing new strategic alliances to initiating new business lines. Kartik started off his careers at Jefferies and Company, a leading global investment bank, where he was a part of the technology M&A team responsible for buy-side and sell-side mandates with fast-growing tech companies in North America and Europe. We welcome all the panelists. I'll now hand it over to Kartik, who will be taking us through the rest of the session. Over to you, Kartik.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Srishti. That was a great introduction of all of us. And Rajendra, Namita, thank you very much for joining and being part of not just the webinar, but also sort of leading it through and through. I know I speak on behalf of all the participants when I say we're all interested to hear about this wonderful Blue Dart story that you both have crafted over the last, I would say 4 to 6 months. And with your permission, I also want to welcome all our esteemed colleagues who've joined us from so many different companies. Everybody welcome. Glad to see you're all and hopefully make sure you're all safe. And at the same time, good to see so many familiar people join us for this webinar, as well as some new faces as well. So thank you again for joining us amid what I'm sure would be usually a fairly busy day. And I think this is a really interesting topic where we've all come across terms like workforce readiness, probably more often now than we would have before. And funnily enough, I remember when I was speaking to a senior leader, Raj, one person said that while the topic seems great, I only have one question for you, that you're quantifying workforce readiness for what exactly? No one really knows where the future is and how it's going to pan out. So I think this is a really interesting and timely topic, and one which is got a lot of perspectives floating around. For everybody's benefit, team, what we've lined up for the next 50 odd minutes, during this webinar, is first just talking about how did Blue Dart really make a case for workforce readiness, and in a way, how was it also very prescient in doing so, because this conversation was floating around well before COVID became what it is today. We will also then talk about, once they came across a clarity on what they wanted to achieve across the business unit or across the business teams, how did they create a blueprint for driving this and executing this in a very seamless manner. And I think the most important part, which I'm sure all of you would like to get a peek into, is what were the resulting insights that they could gather for the workforce at large and for teams in isolation. And how did that then translate into insights and actionables that they're currently taking over? So with that, again, Namitha, Raj, very excited to hear what you have to say on these points. And let me sort of straight away get to it.
Yep.
Right. So Raj, this heading might sound familiar to you. It probably started off with a corridor conversation where you and the MD, Mr. Balfour, of course, perhaps were talking and saying, how soon and what can we really know about the state of future readiness at Blue Dart. And very interesting to see from a conversation what we got into a quantified outcome in a fairly short period of time, in a fairly exhaustive manner across competencies ranging from technical, behavioral, and functional skill sets. And from what I understand through your team, also with 8 to 10 more data points than they would have got in a traditional sense. So this was a great outcome that we've heard from you, and we'll probably hear more about from Namitha and you in the coming slides. But I wanted to take a step back, if I could, and just try to help us to distill. Raj, how would you define workforce readiness today? What did it mean for Blue Dart as well? And where did this genesis of this initiative really stem from? It'd be great to hear from you on that.
So thank you, Kartik. Thank you, Srishti, for your good words and of course fine introduction. Welcome, of course, to every participant. Thank you for joining us. My colleague Namitha is there. So Namitha, thank you for being with me there. Kartik, I think that gentleman or a person who actually asked us to quantification of work for what, or what is going to be the future. I think that's a pertinent question that everybody probably has, correct? Because no one can really predict what is going to be the future. Having said that, I think that's exactly the reason that you want to be in the business, but at the same time you're not very sure as to what are the scenarios going to be panned out, in the next about 6 months, 1 year, maybe beyond that. But I think all of us with a bit of a optimistic, kind of feeling there that the world is going to be there, right? In fact, you get some ray of hopes the last couple of days in terms of cases, coming down in few states of India. So this is going to be, kind of a new normal. Many of us started saying that, we are supposed to live with this, kind of virus. Take care, and of course, go there to actually, progress. Now, this word progress is very important. While you are not able to articulate exactly to what extent and up to what the level in terms of the numbers, business, volumes, etc. But it is going to be there. And some of the industries, particularly like the industries that we coming from, logistics, I think they are going to be at forefront. Okay, but not restricting our talk to only our industry or my industry or our industry as a colleague here. But there are many other industries who will probably have the similar situation at the boardroom level or the senior management level. I'm sure about it. And particularly the established companies who are there for last decade, 2 or 3. We are actually there for last 3 decades. So, the pertinent question comes in that is this the kind of right time or otherwise to look at your, as we always say in the HR, that the most important asset, what we call it as, the people. And my answer to that, without mincing any words, is actually this is in fact the kind of better time to look at your people's kind of skills and knowledge de novo for the new normal. correct? De-novo in the sense, look at it again, whether they are actually, ready to take on this, what we call agile adaptiveness requirement, for the future, which is for the new normal. And that's where it came in, Kartik, within me and my CEO saying that, we are 30-year-old company. We have people who are, let's say not only 5-10 years, but 20, 25 years, 30 years in this company at the frontline level. And one point which I always reiterated, not only during pandemic, pre-pandemic, maybe last, a decade or so, that one layer in the organization, which is so important. Of course, my frontline warriors are very, very important because this is the last mile, kind of battalion. But one above, and maybe two above, they're so very important, that if they decide, they can actually make any big company, or if they don't really be taken care of in terms of their skills and knowledge, they can actually break the company very, very fast. Of course, there are top management and senior management who can actually think strategically and have plans. But unless this, junior and the middle management, which is particularly the supervisory, we call them as frontline leaders, unless they are really looked at, whether they are really ready to take the new requirement of agile adaptiveness, really head on, I think you will suffer. And that's exactly the point me and my MD really discussed along with Namitha, and then said, I think this is the battalion that we'll focus on. They are my, let's say, stalwarts over the years, but I need to sharpen their saws. And first of all, I need to know to what extent I think, their saws are really, kind of little rough now and not sharpened. And that's where I think this whole intervention came in, to assess as to how fast and how quickly and how simply we can actually, get into this intervention of sharpening the saws of these, frontline leaders that we have. And there are thousands of them across the country. That's what I can actually answer, at this point in time.
Sure. Thanks, Raj. I think that's a really interesting point and a macro view that you have shared. And I don't want to start with a contentious question very early on, but I'm also tempted to ask you this. What do you think would have been the consequence for the company had you not gone through this initiative, looking back in hindsight?
I think there are many companies working successfully. I won't name them. In fact, I've been to such companies as well. So one is, of course, you have set your processes right from the day one of your starting, correct, as an inception. But, over the period when you are successful, making money, you probably, feel that, I can do it, every time the same way. And at times, when this kind of adverse situation comes in, then you start, getting a feel saying that, oh, I'm actually getting stuck somewhere. And that time you realize that where is the issue? And then you probably, start, realizing and uncovering that I think I've not paid much attention to my existing battalion who is there. They're working in fact hard and relentlessly, but they're not able to go beyond a particular, let's say, level of excellence and efficiency and effectiveness as well now. Right? And that's where I think, one can actually probe in the dark saying that, okay, let me, try certain things and see if it works. That is actually a trial and error. And of course, many of us have succeeded in that, in the earlier times. But, that won't give you confidence in that what you're really getting into will, deliver you certain, results. Plus, I think today's, scenario, I mean, we call it as an ecosystem. I think we must also realize because, if you put yourself into that shoe of an employee, maybe we are senior level, and you will realize that, you yourself are not really in tune with, let's say, patience, correct? I think everybody wants things really quickly. With the advent of technology, I think everything is on your fingertips, correct? So it is no more a choice for any company to actually plan in these areas and actually quickly look at what needs to be done to sharpen the existing warriors that you have, or existing leaders that you have. And also then, if you're getting in from outside, if at all you're getting in, then what needs to be, provided to them little quickly. I mean, you can't take, let's say, long time, and otherwise you will lose the bus or miss the bus. But what needs to be provided to even the newcomers is also required to be thought of. And I think this is where we actually, looked at saying that, can I have simple, little quicker, and, quite effective, intervention, which can actually come in a little faster. Also during this, let's say, lockdown time, where people don't really or can't really come together for IELTS kind of learning.
Sure.
The interest-led training. That's where I think we came in.
Right, right. And I think quite prescient and fourth thought on yours and Namitha and the MD's part, considering this was really being thought through and chalked out as a question to deliberate well before COVID came into to our picture, right? So just building on this point, right? Once you've sort of created that that perception or internal view on the fact of why workforce readiness was important for you to embark on, and in some ways quantify as well. Also, Blue Dart is a big organization, a part of an even bigger organization. And in that respect, there must have been many moving elements to this initiative that you would have had to take care of before you would even get started. Can you talk us through, firstly, from a Blue Dart DHL relationship, how did that global alignment come into being? What were certain considerations you had to take into account? And I'd like Namitha also to talk a little bit about some of the other factors then coming on to this.
Yeah, certainly. In fact, Namitha probably will come in, so I can speak on this a little more. But let me put the perspective, sure, because the participants must be interested, to knowing that while we are Blue Dart, a very strong brand in India. In fact, I was privy to the kind of transactions when we actually invested. We in the sense that DHL Express then. I was in DHL Express in between 2003 to 2009. So in 2004, 2005, we invested first in Blue Dart. Now as we speak, in fact, Blue Dart is a DHL company to the extent of 75% of stake, which is a published information. That's what I can speak about. But Blue Dart being a domestic express company, very, very successful right from the inception, DHL did not spend them yellow. Otherwise, if I know DHL, Deutsche Post, DHL, so any company that take over, they actually spend them yellow the next day. But Blue Dart being Blue Dart, a very, very strong brand in India, very established, profit making, in fact, very successful. They did not really, mess around with that. And they agreed to the local management saying that this brand is to be nurtured further. For the last 15 years, I think Blue Dart is working as Blue Dart, though it's a DHL company. Of course, there are, let's say, management guidance and overview and stuff like that, like any other group company will have. But it was run quite an independent, let's say, way. One of the reasons, like Namitha and I am here today, for the last about 1.5 years, both of us are actually working in this company. This is probably second inning in the group for me. Namitha, from logistic industry, so he came in as well. So last 1.5 years, I think there is a focus on aligning some of the world-class practices which DHL has, and they are really good in terms of, let's say, HR, people, excellence, and so on. So I think our job is to also bridge between what are the local, practical requirements, because we are a domestic express company. You can't just, have one size fit all, and also bring in the world-class international, people process that we have within our, let's say, repository at the center, and they are really, really good. One of them, in fact, when you were saying, let's say the point number one there, global alignment with DHL. Now, if you look at, while DHL is a global company, but if you look at our, let's say, vision, mission, values, we generally call it as values in India, but we in DHL call them as LA, leadership attributes, correct? So, respect and result is our kind of motto or vision. So, respect and result, 2 words, correct? Under that, there is a value pyramid which actually talks about head, heart, and gut. Under the 3, what you call, verticals. So, head, heart, and gut. So, under head, there are 2, attributes. Under heart, there are 2 attributes. Of course, Namitha will speak about it as we go further in the presentation. And under gut, there are 2 attributes. So, if you look at, there are 6 attributes, are called as, leadership attributes, correct? Now, in normal HR jargon, let's say way, we will call them as competencies, correct? But we're not calling them as competencies. Competencies have gone away from DHL as a word, but, we are actually calling them as leadership attributes. Now, these are organization-wide for 450,000 employees across the globe. And I'm supposed to, let's say, align. Of course, they are very, very correct for us as well in India. So when you are actually bringing in, let's say, local intervention, let's say this one, how do you interview, your local thinking to the global, let's say, thinking that we have in terms of the LA that I just talked about.
Right.
And that's where we really came in saying that if at all I have to look at the behavioral aspect of my supervisory and, frontline leadership, I must connect with my global, attributes for each of them. And they're actually very, very relevant for our, kind of requirement as well. So we actually got those behaviors, and of course, worked with you guys to say, I want to test my supervisors, and they are very commonsensical, by the way. They are not really, what they call rocket science. They are commonsensical behaviors, and which will actually a need of the day, not only in our industry, in our company, but I can actually guarantee you, every participant working in, any of these, companies or industries, I think they would probably require, these as well. Maybe you can call them different, but they will require it for their frontline as well. It's a commonsensical LA, right? So I think we brought in them, and then we said, okay, let's, test these, whether we have them today as a kind of, what we call benchmark or understanding the current situation. And hence we actually wanted to go with this intervention to test the behavioral aspect. And of course, with your help, we also brought in the functional aspect, which is, operation requirement, day-to-day process, day-to-day SOPs and so forth.
Sure.
So on these two, I think we brought in this. One last point before I close my answer is I always had this, worry about the current situation of a, human being's mind, correct? You and me included, where how much, patience and retention that we really have, in these days. You might say, no, I will actually go through these, for 2 hours or 3 hours, but that's surface saving, correct? But internally, you get fed up with, longer messages in WhatsApp, you delete them. You don't want to have, too many webinars as well. There is a, what we call toxicity of webinars as well these days, correct? So I think knowing this well, about my employees as well, with the ecosystem, we wanted something, very, very small in terms of the duration, correct? But we all talk about the bite-sized learning these days. And I was telling my colleagues that, I don't want any learning beyond probably a minute. And but we were talking about seconds, correct, Namitha? But, I said at least, this kind of thing, not beyond 1 or 1 or 2 minutes, correct? But the moment you go, a one-time learning for hours, particularly when you are actually, away from your work and doing it, let's say, remotely, it becomes, anybody's guess that, how many people are really, really interested and doing it intentionally, correct? It's not just a tick in the box. So looking at all these possible issues, I think we really pushed in our sales and of course with your help to look at the bite-sized learning and a simple, learning with interest, correct? So that people don't really do as a formality, but they really do it by heart, correct? And of course with the intent. So that is, I think, to start with, I wanted to actually express that this is why and this is how we actually got into this. My colleague Namitha will add when we go further in terms of the details of this intervention. As you asked.
Sure. No, absolutely. I think aligning with the mothership is always important, and I know that's one thing that a lot of senior leaders have always talked about in their own respective organizations as well. It's an important aspect to consider. And I think just on the point that you were talking about, if I can transition and get Namitha in, Namitha, some of the things that you were considering, right, in terms of new practices to look at to fulfill this initiative and requirement were fairly off the beaten path, if I can call it, right? So walk us through, how did the rubber hit the ground in terms of, not just getting alignment from DHL and the global or like the senior leaders at Blue Dart, but what did you do to sort of build an interest across different stakeholders, across the people who you were perhaps doing this initiative for, as well as readying your own project team? I think all of us would be interested in knowing a little bit about that.
Thank you very much, Kartik. Thank you, Raj, for first of all for organizing this webinar, and thank you, Raj, for throwing the entire macro level light on how we have from nothing to very important leadership attributes process. So, Kartik, so to speak, is the change is not easy, but change is easier when it is done in a right fashion. So when we talk about readiness for the future, when we talk about alignment with parent company, these are, if you look at it, it can turn out to be a heavier topic, but the way we do it, it really makes our life much simpler. So when we were discussing, as Raj rightly said, with our MD CEO, that we need to do something for our workforce. How do we understand that, whether they are ready, what are their key strengths? So what we thought was we need to divide the entire intervention into key areas, which is one is functional and the other one is behavioral. So the basics of the entire intervention, the diagnosis was very, very clear in our head. And then we started influencing our stakeholders, and when we said that we want to do something like this, there was excitement all over the place. However, how we do it was the biggest challenge. And Kartik, as you rightly said, how did it happen? So we first came up with the idea of something digital. Now in digital, there are so many things that are available in the internet era, and there are so many assessment center, development center. There are companies are doing just tick the box exercise, which we never wanted to do it, because we as a Blue Dart, we always believe in people first philosophy. Considering that, we thought of doing something on mobile, which is app based, and thanks to our CHRO who also supported us in such a wonderful initiative, that we thought about it. And what we then got into was something that keeps our employees glued to it, something that keeps our frontline and the supervisors repetitively do it. So is the gamified version. So instead of getting glued to some typical games like Candy Crush or any other games, our employees should get glued to some of the assessment that we do. And trust me, this idea was going viral, and there are people who used to come and ask me, Madam, can I also try this? I know it's for supervisor, but it's fun to do it. So that kind of excitement was built in all across. And this is not a one-man person or a single person intervention that can happen. Fortunately, I had team support across the regions, regional HR team, also from the business side, though we were very thin staffed in terms of HR, and but we were together, we were making it sure that each of our supervisors understand the reason why we are doing it, understand the purpose of it, and take the enough interest. Only then we can get success. We can really put in a lot of money on a lot of things, which many organizations do. But the end result comes only when we engage with our people in different fashion. It, and that too in the pandemic situation, which was really challenging for us. There was constant WebEx done by our team, the constant communication sent. The managers used to talk to our teams on a regular basis. And hence we came up with the idea of, yes, we need to have a gamified version. We need to have something which really connects to our people, engages with our people, and that actually helps the overall organization to understand where are we right now and how can we be better and really do better for even our clients. So whether to talk about DHL strategy, which is leadership in a box, that's the fancy name, and which has a very valuable leadership attributes, which we built in further in Mastero app, which actually helped our supervisor to absorb it so easily. And that was like a wonderful intervention turned out to be.
Right, right. No, I think I'm sure everyone is familiar with the saying that software is eating the world. I think there's a additional caveat to it nowadays going around saying games are eating software. So it's only apt that in a demographic that we are all part of, and for the workforce that Rajan, you had perhaps thought through that this was perhaps a good way to really get the whole momentum started with. And just building on this point, Namitha, you had obviously some complex things to consider just at the drawing board. But once this sort of initiative got a green light, right? One of the things that I think a lot of companies are interested in knowing, because these are still new age at the end of the day, is how would you as a complex company put a blueprint to really execute on some of the finer aspects and make sure that it comes across as good in thought and on paper as it would on the job? So talk us a little bit about the specific type of gamification that you chose through and considered as well. Obviously, it's a very a broad sense and a broad word in today's day and age. So I think it'll be good to just distill 2 or 3 points on gamification that were very core for Blue Dart to consider and get correct from a workforce readiness point of view.
Thank you, Kartik, for bringing out such important aspect. When we say that gamification has many versions, I myself must have tried 50 odd versions before zeroing down onto this. When we were finalizing this, the first thing that came in our mind was, why would a frontliner or a supervisor working with Blue Dart be interested in doing this? It should not be a very lengthy thing. That was the idea even management gave us. Our CHRO Raj has also been giving this, that it should be less than a minute or two. Considering that our boys are always on the road, delivering parcels, talking to our customers. So something related to that, we chose some of the games which are really like the way they deliver their responsibility in day-to-day life, that really made them so comfortable. It also took away the entire pressure of assessment, because in the traditional assessments, people are so tensed about it. They, okay, I've been assessed. And herein, people were so happy doing it. People who were not even part of that particular segment wanted to do this. That kind of excitement was there because the game version was very, very connected to real-time business deliverance. Also, the software and the app was so simple for people to operate, because these are the ground level people. They do not have much of time to really get inside and log in and watch something. So it's basically just not assessment, it's also a learning. The entire revision of their daily routine, their daily deliveries, their daily pickups, that was been really going through and in and out. Plus people were also repetitively doing the same activity. We had not put the caveat of limited slots and limited time, which was giving us a lot of data points. So it was a multifaceted approach that was been given while selecting the gamification version.
Got it. So I think one part of the blueprint was making sure that beyond the buzzword, you have something a little bit authentic and really which fits the genre of people that you're wanting to identify from a readiness point of view. That's one thing I heard you say. The other was in line with what Raj had clearly mentioned. It needs to also be simple, easy, and timely. It should not take too much of effort to do and even roll out for that matter. And having gotten that part right, Namitha, I think the next thing what I heard earlier you and Raj say is that this was a fairly holistic initiative where you wanted to cover both the behavioral as well as the functional attributes, right? And in that respect, the blueprint or the way your team had sort of chalked out the different concepts in sync with the leadership attributes of DHL were quite interesting. I would be curious as a participant also to want to know a little bit more about how did you come across these behavioral and functional concepts, number one, and how did you create the construct for the, if I can just for lack of a better word, call it assessment. Could you throw some light on that also, please?
Sure, Kartik. So behavioral aspect are, as we earlier also said, these are the leadership attributes. And it's so important to live these attributes, because most of the times we talk that leaders only should have these attributes, but any individual who's associated with DHL Blue Dart must have these attributes, because these attributes are living style, I can say. Being result oriented, focusing on respect and result, and yet delivering what our client wants. Leveraging strength is, we all have our strengths, but how do we leverage them? That's more important. Creating and building trust is something that in our organization we always want trust, but do we really trust our employees? Do we really trust each other? That's the concept that this leadership attribute carries. Then we have providing purpose. We as an organization, we always provide purpose to others' life, be it our frontliners, our managers, or be it our client. We are saying, as it says, that the smile simply delivered, the happiness simply delivered, the package is simply delivered, and it is actually lived by each of our frontliners every day. and staying positive in the complex environment like today's is something required for any industry, and every industry, as Raj rightly said in the beginning, is so important for our frontliners to be motivated, because times are tough, and we are there to support them in every possible situation. And that's how the entire behavioral assessment was being thought over. Functional assessment is, we are almost 3 decades old organization, and there are very strong functional and technical teams that we have. And considering that we had made the entire bunch of questions, the selection of questions were also done very thoughtfully, that our day-to-day process do not miss out on the entire intervention. The intervention should be more of useful and more of effective to understand and to implement. That was our entire purpose.
Right, right. And I think it also gave a good view of what could be attributes that needed to be perhaps looked into, not just at the level that you did this, which is at the supervisor level, but then also attributes that like you and Raj identified could be relevant for the people on the ground. And so from that point of view, one thing I just want to also call out as a best practice, correct me if I'm wrong, Namitha, is that your team looked at this one in its whole, in terms of being holistic, B, in terms of being simple and making sure that it's easy for everyone to identify with. And third is something that can also be scaled later on when you're looking at the rest of the workforce where, 80 to 90% of blue darters reside. So I think that that was quite an interesting outcome. And if you can now just also briefly touch upon within these different concepts or attributes, right? What was the thought process when you came, when your team sort of thought through the things to question or assess and get an idea of the readiness? What were some of the things to keep in mind when you did this exercise?
Well, to begin with, Kartik, when we started with it, our purpose was not to just assess people, but to also strengthen them with their strengths. As I always say, that leveraging strength is one of our key attributes. So when we were designing this questionnaire, never that we thought that those people who are not worthy to it should be out of the organization. Many of the organizations these days take assessment to take the other way out. However, we being Blue Darter, the people first philosophy flows through our blood. And we always thought that this holistic point of view is so important that our frontliners, our supervisors, even scalable mode, our managers should know some of the key concepts of behavior and functional, which will help them to grow and also help us to have talent readily available within the organization, because we follow a lot of best practices like executive development review. We follow many other interventions, and this is the data point that we'll get from doing the questions of the assessment, and that's how we will create the future leaders and the pipeline and so on and so forth. So this particular initiative was not just focused on getting the assessment done and just getting the data done. It also gave us a lot of points for the TNI, training need initiatives and assessments, and also the requirement which were shared with their respective managers to go ahead. So it was all in all, it was end-to-end assessment and not just a smaller version of it.
Got it, got it. So key takeaways from here are sort of space out the number of questions in terms of easy, medium, difficult, to understand the levels of proficiency in a particular concept. I think I heard you say that. The other thing which is apparent is that there were different modes of assessing the same thing to, again, get a more authentic outcome in terms of what a person truly understood and truly did not. And I think third is, if you also see the number of questions varying between concepts, maybe there was some level of, I don't want to call it weightage, but certain level of priorities also that you can attribute to certain concepts being a little bit more important than others at a very specific level. So I heard you say these three things in your own way, which I think are very important for us to consider. Thank you for sharing that, Namitha.
So I will hear a little bit, what Namitha was saying. See, this whole concept about the leadership attributes, correct? While they are our, words and of course the definition so far as leadership attributes is concerned. But I must tell you, I think, during this pandemic, in fact, we realized that these behaviors have become so necessary and actually, came up to life actually. And if you look at every single word, of course, we have the huge behavioral, kind of list there. In fact, articulated very well, in a softer way, for people to understand what really it means to actually score, let's say, above normal or above average in terms of, each of these behaviors. We have the list of, softer behaviors under each of them.
True.
But, during pandemic, if you pick any word, correct, having purpose, correct. So, having trust, in fact, being positive in the wake of uncertainties. Now, imagine every one of us are worried about, will I be next in terms of getting infected, correct? Because I'll be lying if I say I don't worry about, the infection coming to my door. I'll be lying. I'm actually worried every day. I thank God, while going to bed, saying that, I'm not, kind of got touched today. Honestly. So, with this kind of situation across us, in fact, when the case is going up every day, as we speak, 20,000 people are on this site, in fact, on the field, correct? And to get them right from the month of May, I think to come and work onto my premises, because see, some of us are, white collared, so we are working from home very, very effectively. And of course, we've decided that we'll work from home kind of permanently. But make sure that we will support these guys, throughout the day, and if not, in night as well, correct? But for them, it is not possible. I mean, my business is on the field, correct?
Absolutely.
So get these guys, 20,000 people to come and actually, help me to bring the business back to almost normal, pre-pandemic, almost normal. I won't give numbers here, but we're almost normal. So, that requires, telling them that, this is being positive in the, let's say, wake of uncertainties like this. Or let's say, how do you leverage strength? Because, most of my workforce, which is in the field, is younger. Now, I have to go into their hearts and then say, you are, let's say, less than 30, less than 35. Your immunity is better than probably others. And you are better placed if you come to workplace, which is, much safer in terms of hygiene, health, safety that we are doing for day in and day out. And we created a kind of proposition saying that, I don't mind to say that your workplace is probably safer than your locality, because they stay in the, congested houses, small houses, big families, correct? Common toilets, so look at it. So when they come to office with this kind of positive, let's say, support, they feel much healthier and much safer. And that's why 20,000 people are working with me. So if you ask me, I think this whole behavioral aspect, and particularly through the leaders that we are actually assessing, I think we have really done it on a daily basis. And, this is a good application of this intervention to start with, and tested in this pandemic, actually, honestly. So each of these 6 attributes, if you ask me, I think anybody can challenge that these are not relevant for today's situation. I think they're so much relevant, A. And B, if you look at it in a simplistic manner, you're looking at, other side, which is, your organization, correct? And not, something which is out of, let's say, the box, but something which is relevant for today, something which is delivering results, something which is making customer happy. That's it. Simple SOPs, simple policies, simple procedures.
True.
So, I think call of the day is make it very, 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 very simple for this person. See, the last person will only deliver as directed by the organization. Now, organization means what? The supervisor, the process, the gadget, that the technology, correct?
True.
But it should be as simple that he just knows from the last, let's say, sentence of that app that I need to deliver to Mr. X by this time and take this, kind of procedure. But we come up with the contactless delivery, customer safety. That is also included in this, correct? So the point is, I think all these attributes, along with the, competencies that we actually brought in, so far as the, business is concerned, I think they really, got married very well. And I must mention here now at this point is, while this is a front-end discussion that we are having, at the back end, with you guys, we worked for almost, I think, a few months to make sure that my IT is really aligned to your requirements, correct, and vice versa. We didn't want my, IT security guys to come in a way saying that, if this is coming onto our platform, this will actually have, data security risk. I think so much of work behind this, and of course, I must, thank you guys that you guys made it so simple. Well, of course, there were a lot of effort, push, pull in terms of, how can it be done? How can it actually be, done risk-free with the mitigation?
True.
I think so. I must actually give compliment to you guys, to actually have come in, seamlessly here. And of course, a lot of change management, as Namitha was mentioning, that it was not easy. Just to let you know, while you have some I think 70, 80 questions here, but at the backdrop, we had 500 plus questions coming from the field. We haven't actually articulated at our offices. We've gone down to supervisors, we've gone down to operations heads, we've gone down to sales heads, we've gone down to couriers and say, what would you like to actually learn to actually make your job a little better? And 500 plus questions were actually brought in, and then we shortlisted about, I think, 70, 80 what you actually see on the list. So I think this is a big work behind this, front end, what we see on the screen. I think a lot of work, and of course, a lot of credit goes to you guys as well. So Namitha and team as well. Okay. So I think participants must know this is not, as they are just, sounded to be, but once it is done correctly, I think the fruits are really, really good to actually experience, and we are actually happy about it. Just wanted to add that.
Sure. No, I think that's very important.
Add one thing, Kartik, is that when we started the intervention, people were worried that whether we'll be able to complete this intervention or no. And me and my team, thanks to Raj, in fact, the true motivation that goes in our team throughout is that we were of the thought that when do we get the result and we start working on that. So that kind of zeal, that kind of engagement, that kind of motivation was there with the teams across, and that's what kept us going. As Raj rightly said, that the funneling work was too much to do, and yes, we got tremendous support from you, Khushbu, and all the other team members who were always there with us whenever we faced any challenge. You all really helped us out on a timely basis.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Namitha. I think it's interesting, right? But one of the things I was mentally just processing when I was hearing Raj is that this is almost like a blood report of the organization, isn't it? You're looking very anxiously to know nowadays on a personal level whether you have a certain infection or not. This is without calling it an infection. This is really telling you what are the strengths that you have in the core DNA of the organization. And one thing which I'll just highlight for everyone's benefit, I think it got covered in what you were saying, Raj and Namitha, is how you were able to also administer this, right, in a way that it didn't affect business as usual or business unusual once COVID came into the place. Because let's not forget that in logistics, whether it's Blue Dart, DHL or others, that was pretty much the carrying vehicles of everything essential that was happening in the economy. And to still continue this initiative, and like perhaps the imagery suggests, that to make sure that we are leveraging downtime of the supervisors to our maximum, I think was a big a plus point from what you were able to do. And I think that also really helped to operationalize this, in addition to, of course, the way the questions were created and the way it was made to feel simplistic and universal, from what I heard you say. Great. So coming now to the last section, right, which is now that you've done this, you're coming to see what the blood work looks like, so to speak. I think we'll be curious to know what were some of the insights to the level that you can share, of course. What were certain insights that you found useful as a Blue Darter for the organization? And also what were or rather what are now the next steps when you're looking at actioning them? So Namitha, maybe if you can talk about some of these things, and Raj, if you also would like to add on to them, I think it'll be great for everyone to hear your views on this too.
So the best part, this was the only intervention in my entire career that I've done, and where I didn't have to follow up with the supervisors and the couriers that now you log in and this is the time. They were so happy with this, and it's a specialty of Blue Dart as well, that people are so connected that without follow-up, people start doing the work once the command has been given, and people really follow through. So that was the beauty of the entire intervention, that I must appreciate that. And secondly, there are many data points, there are many, I would say, key elements that we got, especially with the supervisors. How are they managing their teams? What are the aspects that we need to further make it better? which will ultimately, help our entire service levels and entire, I would say, client satisfaction, and help our client to get a better service and better deliverance. That was our entire motto, and I think we've got a tremendous data point to work upon, which my team has already started working on, especially on the training front, as I always say. And the best part that happened was the alignment with DHL strategy of leadership attributes. When it came over to us, and when Raj and CEO decided, the best part was through this intervention, we also shared the entire attributes, as Raj has already mentioned. And we now are very confident that people are aware about it. People are living through these attributes, that too during the pandemic situation. So some of these are my takeaways, as well as the teams have been really happy having this so clear data to work upon.
Yeah, I think one unfortunate side effect on a lighter note is that more data also meant more homework for your team, but hopefully it was all for the better. And just for everyone's benefit, one of the things that we in the Blue Dart initiative wanted to capture was not, like Namitha was saying, to make this a compulsory or mandatory exercise, but to make sure, because it's engaging and self-fulfilling, are people going back to, not just assess themselves, but also to develop themselves as a habit. And one data point that we wanted to capture for that was how often did each supervisor go back and attempt those questions even after mandatory completing it. And that was one sense of effectiveness that in this initiative, Blue Dart was able to capture and showcase, which is a great outcome. And just following up on this, at a high level, you did see some insights on what was perhaps positives and what were certain areas where you needed to plug in the gaps, right? So to speak on those functional and behavioral attributes, Namitha and Raj. Again, without getting into too much specifics here, how did this help you? What was the feedback that you got from, let's say, the manager and as well as the supervisor? And at a leadership level also, what does this mean for you now?
So, Kartik,
I may come in here, Namitha, sorry. No, just to actually look at the color coding here. I think this RAG analysis we always do in the organization. There is red, amber, green. And it is good to see that we have hardly any red there. It's amber and green. So it actually tells you, at my level or maybe my MD's level, while Namitha was getting into details, in terms of what's really inside, for data. But at our level, at this topmost level, just to have the eagle eye view in terms of, where is my organization? So you get little, kind of happy, saying that you're not really, badly put, correct, or badly placed in terms of your current situation. But I think we should not also become complacent, and hence we look at these amber areas, correct, in terms of, let's say, competencies, which is behavioral assessment or maybe leadership attributes that we call it as. So these areas, while we have planned to roll out this learning to everyone up to supervisors. In fact, our LEAB, which is Leadership in a Box program, already covered 3-4 layers of the organization pre-pandemic, and I think post-pandemic now we are coming up with the virtual module. But we have planned to take this module to the last person in the supervisory level, which is the leadership attitude, correct?
Right.
I will actually then looking at these colors, I will actually make a little more thrust on being result oriented, providing purpose. We'll understand from your data as to why did people attempt 3 or 4 or 5 times before they became successful on that particular question. Did they not understand the concept clearly? Was the question, the behaviors below the questions was not really clearly understood? What is it, correct? Which means that if they do not have this understanding, they might actually not apply this correctly in the customer place as well, or in the business place as well.
True.
So we'll focus a little more on that. So very clear insight. Similarly, in the functional assessment, if you look at productivity and shipment pickup. Now, pickup is my core, correct? If I have to give customer experience, saying that okay, I've asked you as a customer. I mean, I'm a customer, you are a Blue Dart. And if I ask you to come to my place at this and this time, shipment form, and it has to reach to my other business or maybe other person in time with let's say accuracy, efficiency, effectiveness, correct? Now that is the biggest let's say area for me, the starting point of my business. Now there, if it is 44, then I'll actually look at which questions did it really give me 44, and we'll look at those behaviors and actually start developing people on that. So that's a very clear indication that, we got as a management. You don't have to be perfect. By the way, all participants will agree with me. Nothing is perfect in this world, correct? Seldom anything is perfect. But, with the indication that we got from this assessment, we are now going to actually look at these areas instead of worrying about every single area and doing nothing, correct? So this is, I think, my take out of it. Namitha, you want to add?
So, as I always say that we are building the culture, and the culture is going to attract talent. And having this kind of assessment done, we know the areas where we need to work more to have better talent. So if we want to be a better place to work, a good place to work, and the best place to work, we need to have clarity from top to bottom to understand the ground level reasoning, the understanding and thought process, the passion, why, what, where. And this is what is the best part of this data that we've got from the various modules that we've assessed on. So it's a culture building exercise as well.
Got it. So interesting points. I think one, just to summarize, is you don't have to fill every hole. You need to sort of prioritize which ones are important and act on them accordingly. And this is where this kind of an analysis has helped you at a leadership level as well as at a local leadership level. The other thing I heard Raj pick up on is, going a little bit in depth into a concept and saying, was it an issue on comprehension, or if not, which were the specific questions at a minute level that people were struggling to understand, so that operationally you can then improve the minuta over there and get people to become more receptive and also improve performance. And needless to say, this also looked at improving the culture. Now, one thing we had talked about earlier is this also gave you a lot more data points, right? And with data points sometimes can come confusion. And one input I think we immediately picked up from your feedback, if you remember, Namitha, was the sense of distribution of what was lacking on a per individual level was still not apparent, right? And hence we looked at a distribution where we said, okay, right. We look at saying, okay, if averages sometimes can be misleading. Let's look at the distribution of people who are outliers in a way and who are both below and above the norm. And just an example of one of the topics that Raj was talking about, which is shipment pickup, in saying, okay, how many supervisors were at what part of the category? And I think one really good outcome, if you want to talk about it, Namitha, was how the enablement thereafter, right, as a result of this could be different for these three levels of people who were both at the norm and above and below the norm. Do you want to just briefly mention what were the ways in which you will now be treating them or developing them, if I can call it?
So I would say more of developmental area because we have constructed all the module spaces, these particular aspect. And we have the operations capability trainers all across India, and they pick up those people, they make a batch of them, they start training them, again, reassessing them, checking with the managers, making sure that they've understood it very clearly. So that even in future, when we do this assessment, we can see the positive, shift in the curve. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's so important to treat people in their own individual level and not combine them with averages. So I think that was good feedback and a great outcome. And another thing which I wanted you and Raj to briefly talk on the insights part is you gave the Blue Darters freedom to use this initiative at their will, meaning that they didn't have an opportunity just to, if I can call it, assess themselves one time. There were many instances where they kept going back to learn and keep assessing themselves. What was the outcome of that? So this this graph, for example, illustrates in a way the ramp up for an entire region, and obviously can be broken for each individual. But what would this kind of outcome or a graph indicate to you? How do you think this was?
Namitha, are you answering that?
Yes. So, the repetitive in nature, something which is repetitive in nature.
So I will try and actually answer that. Are you able to hear me? Just one response, Kartik.
Sure. Yes, Raj, we can hear you.
Yeah. No. I think so. If you look at, I think what we discussed, I think Namitha came back online now. So what we discussed internally is, let's make it, in a kind of unthreatening way, because sometimes, this assessment word actually are taken a little differently by the employees, correct? Because they, moment would say assessment, they immediately think of the elimination, correct? And ours was not that, because we wanted to actually have it in an unthreatening way. because I've seen the organizations that I've worked in earlier, that sometimes for this initiative, you have to push people to actually complete some of these assessments. But here in this organization, I think very, very happy to, say, people just, kind of latched onto it. We didn't have to actually push. There was a pull. And, in few months, I think we completed 100% supervisors. And that was actually a kind of music to my ears. In fact, I was telling my MD that I never seen this kind of pull for such initiatives. Now, maybe I think, I must give credit to this whole, kind of design that people, once got in, they actually found it very, very interesting and happy. Correct? And happy quotient is very important to actually, make people, attached to that for a longer duration. I think that was a crux. Correct? So what will we do? In fact, looking at the number of attempts people actually have failed on a particular question. That again, I think we will take, your help. Probably you already have it. Saying that, okay, get me the insight of, which questions were attempted continuously by supervisors. So we will do Pareto, 80-20 thinking, correct? In that, okay, give me the 20% questions were attempted, let's say 3 times or more by 80% of the supervisors. I'll pick that as a theme, correct? And then actually, we will develop models on that. We already have the models on that. So we will actually, focus more on that. So we actually exactly know which area to focus on instead of again, worrying about everything and probably getting mediocre, results. That was my take out of this insight. Namitha, you can add now. I can see you active there on the screen.
So when we had these repetitive questions, it was also, apart from whatever Rajesh said, apart from that, it was also a nature where people were absorbing a lot of things inside their mind. So it's psychologically also, I'm sure people are aware about it, that the more you read, the more you repetitively register in your mind, that means you're understanding it better. And you're making a meaning out of it. Human being meaning-making machines. It's always the repetition that helps them to restore better and revise better. So we also understood that why are some of the questions, the language-wise, the understanding-wise, the importance-wise, it was going up and down. So those kind of feedback also really helped us designing the other interventions that we were working on. So it was even a lateral parallel exercise done.
Right. I thought I'll just also talk about or reiterate some of the things that you've just highlighted, Raj and Namitha, as best practices that you believe from a people perspective really helped you to take this initiative to its fruition and also scale it further now. One I heard you say is repetition. The fact that you didn't have to push this, and without pushing it also, it wasn't that people saw this as a one-time initiative and they continued to learn through this so-called assessment process. Obviously, from your perspective, this gave you more data. So that in itself was a revelation, which now we're looking at further prioritizing and seeing how to personalize the enablement. And I think the last point is how does this data also connect for the business leader at the front line so that he gets to see not just the learning input required for his team, but also the linkage of whether if and when that gets done, how does it impact business also? Ultimately, I think we all know that that's what gets managers excited about training. And I think that's where your initiative is heading. So some great work there done by Namitha, you and the team, and Raj. And we were very happy to be part of it. I'm conscious of the time. I know we are 5 minutes over, but I believe there may be a couple of questions from our participants. So I'd firstly like to thank them for staying the course with us. And Namitha, Raj, with your permission, maybe we'll ask Srishti to just verbalize a couple so that you can maybe give some insights to those questions and people who ask them.
Sure.
Srishti, over to you.
Thank you, Kartik. Okay, so one of the questions that has come up is about how did you communicate and position the initiative to the workforce? Like, was there any concern with regards to confidentiality of the data? Because sometimes the employees feel that their data might be used for some other purpose. So how did you position and communicate this to the employees within Blue Dart?
So I can actually talk about it. I think the design of the intervention itself is in an unthreatening manner because some of us at a senior most level, we've gone through it ourselves, correct? And we haven't cleared the assessment in first or second attempt. Because we don't really work on day-to-day basis, let's say on the shop floor. But as a senior leader, we are supposed to be aware of every aspect of business, correct? As the ideal expectation. So if we felt I think I probably scored only 70% or 80%, I need to get 100%. So I actually tried again, correct? So what happens? I think the design itself, makes you learn. And that's, I think, beauty of this online learning sometimes. If you design it correctly, it makes you learn automatically. And that's what has happened. I think people felt good saying, okay, I think I'm not able to score 90% or 100%. Hence, I need to actually attempt again. Maybe this question I was not very sure of. Now let me actually answer it a little differently. So while they got their question answered correctly and they got the score, at the same time they learned that Namitha rightly said, repetitively when you do something, it gets registered in your brain forever. Correct? It's a practice makes man of person perfect. That's what we always know about it. I think that's the beauty of this whole intervention. And I think as we are learned, we also realize that this is good. I think people are learning, liking it, and we are coming to know. And see, this is not being done for any, let's say, promotion or elimination. Correct? This is done purely from a development point of view.
Makes sense.
Otherwise, what will happen if they don't learn? See, I mean, I think the HR folks on this call probably they have to know entire, let's say, behavior processes are interconnected. Now, it's not again, threatening, but let's say if the supervisors do not take, interest in their own development, now as a HR process, I have become very, very little stricter on this, performance-oriented culture in this company. Now, while, I will have bell curve, but those who actually fall apart, they will actually fall, behind in terms of those, bottom 20%, correct? If they don't really learn themselves. So the process will automatically take care of them, that they are aware of. It's not a person. And hence, I think it is in their interest to actually learn it in a nice way without, having any worries to start with. But if they don't learn, they will actually commit mistakes in the, let's say, work. And with those mistakes, they probably will get reprimanded or not, which is again not said upfront. And hence, I think, when we actually spell out this objective, spell out this purpose, I think their bosses really liked it.
Okay.
And when you say that, I don't have, let's say, blue-blooded frontline because they are old guys. So we said, of course, you have them. You actually have to sharpen them. That's why that word galvanize coming in, in this presentation. I think this is what people liked it. And of course, we were very upfront in communicating. Correct? You have to be honest and upfront. I think this time there is no space for what you call, sugarcoating. You have to be very, very honest and upfront.
That's true. That's very much true. Namitha, would you like to add anything to this?
Well, a lot technical, I would say. Appreciative inquiry is the term that we very often think about it. But then when we start appreciating our frontliners, obviously the entire benefit goes not just to the organization, also to the clients. So keeping that in mind, we kept on communicating what is good for them, what is beneficial for them. And we were very transparent, as Raj rightly said. The number of WebEx calls, the number of telecalls due to pandemic, we were never tired of doing it. We were always excited to do this, and that actually made life very smooth. And we did have a lot of support from the senior management team as well, so to speak, to popularize this at even ground level.
Yeah, that's true. Moving on to the next question, just to understand, like, how are you planning to use microlearning and gamification going forward based on the results that you have acquired from the previous initiative?
Yeah. So again, I think Namitha can add, but our vision is to only have learning on the go, right? Because as you know, 85% of my employees are actually on the field. And with pandemic, probably post-pandemic, there is a let's say a whole lot of bouquet in terms of what we want to do, even face-to-face. These are the group-led programs are very, very relevant. But on a day-to-day basis, every day, how can they learn on the go? And that learning on the go is a kind of requirement of bite-sized learning, correct? Micro-learning. Yeah, and that is why this is a good test that we actually have tested it successfully.
Okay.
So, the result of this is the insight. We have the bigger modules created by Namitha's team under L&D umbrella. It's very easy to then, kind of dissect those modules, make it relevant for the day. For example, just want to give you one example of an industry. Let's say when my person goes for a pickup, correct? And if he doesn't know a particular code to be put, let's say if he's a new employee, can my, app just for a, let's say touch of a finger, will he really be able to query that what is the code for this, let's say feature of a product? and he gets the answer in about 1 second. Correct? So that's the learning. Plus it's like a, let's say Blue Dart Google, so to say. Correct? I think that is what we are aiming for. I think we are already working on it. And I believe going forward, that's going to be the name of the game, that people would like to have learning on the go, because, as we say, the whole world is my school, correct? Let's say you and me, when we observe things, we learn, correct? And we then try to, if it is good, we try to imitate that as well, correct? We must observe ourselves as well. So I think this is what we are going to pick up, the brain and the heart. And we say, okay, you don't have to actually, stretch yourself out to learn. On the go, if you have a habit, you will actually learn with your gadget in the hand. And if I think 100% of my employees got the on-the-move gadget, which is the smartphones in their hand, which we use for our delivery purposes. On the same gadget, they'll get the app and actually learning on the day.
That's true. So just-in-time learning could be really helpful for the delivery men, especially. That's what's true. Agree. Then next is also to understand what was the feedback from the force, what was the feedback that you gathered from them? How did it feel? How did they feel? Was it beneficial to them?
I think Namitha can answer this better because she has been in the field for that.
So very interesting parts. In fact, they used to actually feel the entire game like, they are doing it by themselves, and they've given such fantabulous feedback that, Madam, how did you think about it? And in the local language, they have communicated that this was so much touching their heart and they wanted to keep doing this. So they were checking with us, do we have some more games coming up for them? So something of that sort, they really not just liked it, it's a very small word, they enjoyed doing it. And in fact, the reputation shows that sometimes even they have given the correct answer, but still they want to enjoy that game. So that kind of positive energy was been generated during the tough times. And that too, when we did this intervention, it was the complete lockdown. Kartik knows about it, and the way we were popularizing it, we were literally calling people and saying that, okay, there is a Mastero app, you can download it, you can do this, do that. So, the entire step was, I would rather say that it was more of a fun game, that we made it the way we communicated to them, and the same way they responded to us, that they really enjoyed it. And there are certain other people's in the regions, especially, they were not from the same background, but they wanted to have the flavor of this game, and that kind of positive feedback that we have got from people around.
Okay, that's really great. That's great then. I think that's it from the question side side. I think that brings us close to the webinar. I would really like to thank Rajendra Ghag and Namitha for joining us today in today's webinar. I would also like to thank all the attendees who took out time and joined us for the webinar today. If you have, we will be sharing the recorded session, and we'll be sharing the link to the recorded session with everyone as a follow-up email. If you have any further queries, you can reach out to me on my personal ID, which would also be mentioned in the chat window. It's srishtik@inspireone.in. With that, I think we come to the close. Kartik, any closing words that you want to say?
No, I just want to thank everybody for joining us again. I know we went over, but thank you very much for sticking on. And a big, big thank you, obviously, to Raj and Namitha. Great to hear your story, and terrifically motivated to be a part of it and to be a part of the journey going forward. Thank you again, and I wish everybody a great week ahead.
Thank you.
So thank you, Kartik, and your team. Of course, it was the joint effort. So we always believe that we have partnership with the provider, though you are a provider. But such initiative doesn't work unless you are a partner in this. Making it successful. You can't just throw our problem on your wall or otherwise. I think it has to be in partnership. It was very good partnership in terms of making it successful. So thank you for that.
And
thanks, Raj.
I would say that it's our journey and it's our initiative, not just Blue Dart. It's a joint venture, I would say, and I was really happy working with the entire Mastero team. So as my team, we've never had any challenge as such, but it was quite a smooth sailing. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Namitha. Thank you. Thank you
Thanks a
very
lot.
much.
Have a great day for the.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thanks, Srishti. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.